Oh, hey guys, Willie and Murfitt here, and welcome to part 2 of the Classic Mini Radius Arm rebuild. Okay, so in the first episode we stripped the whole car down, and in this issue we're going to be rebuilding the bearing kit in this here radius arm. Now, there's a shaft that goes between the two, there's a roller bearing at the bottom, and there is a brass bush at the top. Now, the reason this is so difficult is because the roller bearing would just pop out and the new one pops in, but the brass bush has to pop out, or has to cut out and then remove, and then put the new one in and then ream it to size. It's unbelievably windy today, and I'm in the big shed. I've had to move a few bits of steel around, but let's just get cracking and see how we get on. Okay, so with the whole setup on the vise, I've got the brake still attached because I don't want to remove that. I can just remove this bottom washer and pull the shaft up and out. So that's the shaft. Now the only thing I need to keep of this is this bracket here. Everything else can just be binned. So as you can see, this here is the brass bush. Okay, so using the Dremel tool, I've got a small cutting disc on it. I'm just going to try and cut my way through this bearing, try and thin it out so then I can punch it out as well. Okay, so I'm not really sure at what point the camera went off. So what I've done is I've cut a groove into the brass bush. I've then hammered it over to try and make it sort of a little bit looser around the edge. I've now flipped the radius arm over, and using a punch, I'm going to push down, and when I hit the solid thing, that is the edge of that seal. And just give it a tap. Okay. Flip it back over, hopefully that's released it a little bit. Okay. So I've beaten it all around, and the bush has now collapsed. Just got to try and work out a way of getting it out. So, maybe just like that. So there we have the old brass bush. Cut through the middle, punch down, done. Okay, so on one side you've got the brass bush, and this side here you've got a needle bearing. There's a number of ways you can do these. You can punch it from the bottom, or I like to use one of these tools where you select the size you want, you put it in, and as you screw the lower bolt up, the top part of it spreads. They've got a lip that sits on the bottom of the bearing, and as you hammer it out, it brings the bearing with it. Let's find the right size. Screw this part of it on, and then I've got a slide hammer. I can slide up and down. Let's move this so you can see. Now that's gone tight. I'll just and you can see here my bearing is coming out, and there we have it. The bearing is released. So there we have the needle bearing. Now what happens is the shaft goes in there, and you can see inside all the long bearings, and as the shaft rotates, they basically roll like this. Okay, so the shaft is out as well. Next job, I'm gonna fit the new brass bush. So here we have it. Inside there's little grooves, and that's for the oil to sort of work its way around. So there's no right or wrong way to fit this, but I'm going to go with the writing side facing outwards. So I try to go when I put these in, hit it, hit it, hit it, hit it, to try and get a nice even spread. Obviously, it's quite hard to try and do that, but failing that, you can find some flat pieces of metal, put it in place. Get in there. Okay, so you think you're done at this point, but when you come to take your new shaft, which is here, and you take it out of the bag and you release your nut and your washer, and you go to put it in and realise that it's not going to fit. This is where the fun starts. And unfortunately that is also where the video stops. So I had a bit of a glitch with the camera on a few different occasions that evening, and it turns out I have no footage of the reaming process, which I am really gutted about. However, if you head over to Keith Miller's channel, which I'm going to put a link over here, and his beautiful mini Piao, he shows you the full reaming process, and he goes through the step-by-step guide. Now, he is also doing a rear radius arm or rear suspension rebuild at the moment. His has gone slightly less to plan than this one here has. So, this is a real basic parts off, parts back on. Unfortunately, Keith's is a case of he's had to remove the subframe, do bits of welding, etc, etc, but his job is phenomenal. So go check out his channel, go check out his builds. He's got various builds on the go at the moment, and wow, you'd be blown away. So I'm going to go now to the next morning, and I'll come back hopefully very soon with a reaming video for you guys. So let's go. Sorry. Good morning. I got home last night and decided to go straight to bed. So it's just before 5 o'clock because I woke up before my alarm and thought rather than waking everyone else up, I will just get up and crack on. So I've got my lower arm built, or my suspension arm built, which is here. Now today's plan is to fit this up. So I've got to fit the knuckle, and then I can pop this into the car. I'm going to be using a trolley jack to support the weight of the brake arm side of the radius arm, and while I'm doing that I can put everything else back onto the vehicle. It's a pretty straightforward process, just basically part one in reverse, but the first part, actually getting the radius arm in and aligned, is probably the hardest part. So I've got to get the shaft on the far end into the subframe, and then align the two bolts and line them up. But what tends to happen is as you try and line them up, the shaft slides in and out, your rubber bush or your rubber little seal pops off, and you've got to take the thing back out because it's really hard to get back on in situ. But we will get there, so let's just crack on, shall we? Because I am very tired. Okay, so first job I'm going to do I'm just going to try and clean up inside here a little bit. A bit of grime and old grease and stuff left over from the old radius arm. Okay, so this is the new cone we have here, and this is the old cone here, which, as you can tell, there's quite a big difference in the sort of the spring and the bounce. So I'm glad we're changing these. That's obviously going to be the reason why the thing's knocking, because the cone itself has collapsed, causing some movement back and forth. As I took the suspension up in the air and removed the wheel, I could remove this without even removing the shock absorber, so I'm surprised it hasn't actually fallen out of the car. In fact, it's a bit of a miracle, to be honest. So yeah, we're replacing them with the newer ones, so they can go up into this little housing here, and that is the new cone fitted. With the adjuster ride kit for Mini Sport, it comes with, for the rear, so let's get one, a shaft. Now the shaft itself gets fitted into the, on one end you have the knuckle joint, which is here, and on the other end you have the high-low. So that is the finished setting, and as you can imagine, you have a thread inside here which winds out and out and out and out and out. Making this longer, making the tightness between the knuckle joint and the cone longer, making your car higher. And if you want to go lower, you wind it back in. Use your two locking nuts, one to adjust where you actually want it, the second one to lock that into place. And then that is that part of the car done. So I'm going to put the knuckle joint into the arm, give it a little tap with a hammer, just make sure it's nice and secured. And then we can start putting things back in. Okay, so the knuckle joint itself here sits into this hole in the radius arm. Now I like just to give them a little bit of a tap. Just to make sure that's seated nicely. And then once that's in the car and the suspension is pushing onto this, that'll just seat 100%. So we have our fitting kit for the radius arms. We're going to be using new bolts, and I've also got my clevis pins to go through this hole here. Now that goes through bottom to top, the split pin goes through the top, and then that holds on this radius arm, or the handbrake quadrant bracket. So it's important to get that on the right way. Other than that, it just slots into place and we are done. The next job is fitting the high-low. As you can see, the radius arm is fitted, it's bolted up top and bottom and underneath as well using the new bolts. These ones here are just nipped up, the same as the inside. So the actual arm itself does move, which is fantastic. So I'm going to try now to slide that high-low into place and then adjust it up. Okay, so what I've done now is I've just sanded the inside lip of the rubber cone. And the cone is now seated up until the subframe. That means now that the high-low is actually seated better into the cone as well. I have put the shaft on, and the shaft's on the knuckle joint, which is why there's a gap here. So as I lift that up, that gap will close. So I'm going to jack the arm up now, and I'm going to put the shock absorber mount or shock absorber on the bottom and on the top. hopefully that will then hold all this into place. As I say, I've got the 2 bolts here, the 2 bolts under here. This is now in line, so once the shock's on, I can then start to adjust up where I want this high-low to be, and I can put the flexi hose on afterwards. So yeah, we're going really well. Okay, so the radius arm's now fitted. I've just off camera fitted up the brake hose. So that is this 15mm nut to lock the hose in place, and then this nut here. So you push the shaft onto the end of the hose, make a nice connection, and then you tighten this up. And then once that's tight, that is then done. You can release the clamp. So I've done that. The clevis pin for the radius arm isn't in as yet. They are outside and it's very rainy. The handbrake cable still needs to be fitted, but I've just adjusted this up by, tighten up until they remove the slack from the knuckle and the shaft up here. There is a bleed nipple on here as well, so I'm going to angle that down so I can get access through here to be able to grease that, and I can grease this as well at the same time. So the clevis pin here is done. I just need to put a split pin through this little hole and then bend it back around. So that would be that part done. I've got to do obviously the same for the handbrake quadrant, which is still a little bit loose in the carrier, but I haven't got the pins in here right now, and I'm not going outside because it's raining. But yeah, that's that part done. Let's fit the wheel, get the car on the ground. I've adjusted it all up. You can see that the adjusting nut here and the locking nut are now tight, and there is minimal movement on there. I've put a little bit of copper slip on the inside of here because there's a metal seat, and I'll just wipe that copper grease off of that boot. I've also greased through this nipple here and this nipple here, so there's grease all over. Okay, so I have my split pin here. I'm just going to poke it through the hole of this clevis pin. And then what I'll do is, using some pliers, just rotate it round. And then I want to split these 2 arms out, one that way, one to the left and one to the right. Just leave them back on themselves. And then what that does there, that locks that into place, so then I've got the shaft going through and then back round, and that isn't going to come out. The next one, I want to use one of these tiny little ones, and I put that through the handbrake clevis pin. I come from the inside out. Fitted and wrapped round. Okay, so one thing I have learned recently, thanks to Keith Miller, is that this spacer here isn't an aftermarket thing. It's actually fitted to the car sports pack alloys to allow the sort of wheel to clear anything behind. Let's just stick that in. I'm happy with that. That is absolutely great. The gapping on the arch is lovely. Not too much, not too little. And yeah, count the amount of threads as well so we can match to the other side. And that looks like a really, really lovely stance. Okay, so the wheel is back on the car, and that is the end of this episode. In the next episode, I'm going to be stripping down the other side. Now, it's pretty much going to be the same as this side here, apart from the fact the fuel tank's going to go off. So it's probably going to be a much sped up and less explained video. The only thing I'm probably going to get to is if I hit any snags, and I can go through that. Now, if you are looking to do this job, this one here has been probably the best job I've ever done for the rear suspension. Everything's free, everything's moving, everything is as it should be. If you are less lucky, Keith Miller has done a fantastic video series on his Mini PL. If you haven't seen that, go over and check that out. Now, he has gone to the opposite sort of level of the spectrum where everything is broken, and it just gives you a bit of an insight into, before you start this job, what may pop up. Now, I've done a couple of these, and this has been the easiest one. The last one I did, I had a few bolts snap out, and I drilled the bolts out and re-tapped the threads, and then fitted new bolts, and it went fine. So I've been very fortunate. I know Keith's had to do numerous amounts of bodywork, etc. Right, it's 6 o'clock, so time to get in and get cleaned up, ready for work. So thank you so much for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, please hit the thumbs up. Please leave a comment down below, and if you can, subscribe to the channel. That's it. See you later. Bye.